Hi. So I've been doing videos and talking about after my mom passed away. And um, so aside from her visiting in dreams, some of the things that looking back on now, I know, I suspected it was her at the time, but now I look back and I know it was her. One of them was my husband at the time, my daughter, and I standing in the kitchen, and the drawer just opened in front of us, and all three of us looked at each other like we knew nobody touched that drawer. It wasn't a faulty drawer. There was nothing wrong with the drawer. It had never done it before, and actually never did it again either. We had a ceiling fan in that same kitchen, and it would make a beeping sound when it would start. And no one standing by the switch, and it would turn itself on, and you'd hear the beeping, and the ceiling fan would start with nobody touching it. There were no remotes back then. So it couldn't have been played with from an iPhone or something. So that was another one. Oh, another one was my teenage daughter at the time would go and get herself off to the school, right? High school, whatever. And I would sleep in a little later because high school is pretty early, and I had a younger one at home. Anyway, so I wake up to this blasting music, and I'm like, what is this kid doing? What's wrong? I get up, I go downstairs, and there's the radio, and it's blasting, and I'm thinking it must have an alarm or something, so I turn it off. So when she gets home, I tell her, I'm like, can you check that radio because it must be set for something? And she's like, okay, but I don't think it has an alarm. So she checks it, and there's no alarm. So we unplug it because I'm like, well, I don't know what it was, but I don't want it going off tomorrow. So we unplug it. The very next day, probably about the same time because she was already gone, it goes off again. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Go downstairs, and it's not plugged in because we unplugged it the night before. So I'm like, well, clearly it's got batteries. It didn't have batteries either. I threw it in the garbage because at that point in my life, things like that would freak me out. I wouldn't question it, it would just freak me out. So there were many things that later, after the fact, you're like, what was that? Two mourning doves that would sit on my deck that had, again, when things are out of the normal, that's when you kind of have to look at it. If mourning doves were on my deck for the past 10 years, it would be one thing. But after my mom passes, then all of a sudden they're there. A butterfly landed on me it was actually the day my mom passed, and I'm outside with the kids, and a butterfly landed on me and sat there. And you know how you have those little conversations with yourself, like, if this means anything, or if it's a message, or if it's my mom or whatever, stay a few seconds longer. Well, I had that little conversation, and it did stay a few seconds longer than just stopping and flooding by and then leaving again. It had meaning, and I felt it at the time, but now I understand it 20 years later, of course, right? Anyway, those are a few of the things. If I think of any more, I'll definitely try to make another video or whatever, but those are a few of the things. If you're experiencing those things, and dimes too is another one. If I find dimes, I have so many. If I'd have kept them all, I could have done a lot of stuff, maybe more vacations, huh? So yeah, if you're experiencing some of those things, it could be your loved one. It doesn't mean you're haunted. It doesn't mean things are bad. Sometimes people are just dropping by to say hi because they still love you, and energy never stops. So have a good day. Talk to you later.